raced through a Hollywood recording studio. Ozzy Osbourne's daughter Aimee and her producer escaped with the help of another music producer who used his voice to guide them out of the inferno.
Some families were born into fame. Others had fame thrust upon them. And then there are those rare few who step out of the spotlight, not because they couldn't handle it, but because they wanted something more valuable: freedom. When you think of the Osbourne family, you probably picture chaos, humor, outrageous moments, and the MTV cameras that followed them through the early 2000s. That show turned Ozzy, Sharon, Jack, and Kelly into global reality stars. It changed pop culture forever. But what about the daughter you didn't see? Her name is Aimee Osbourne, the eldest child, the one who quietly walked away when the cameras rolled in. At just 16 years old, when MTV was preparing to set up lights and microphones inside the Osbourne mansion, Aimee made the decision most teenagers could never imagine. She left home. Thoughtful. Why? Because she didn't want her adolescence reduced to an edited storyline. She didn't want to be a character in the world's first rock and roll reality show. She wanted to grow up, without the noise, without the labels, and without strangers dissecting her every move. For Aimee, it wasn't about rebellion, it was about survival. Privacy was her lifeline, and she was willing to sacrifice instant fame to protect it. Years later, she explained it in her own words. She valued the ability to walk down the street without being recognized, to order a coffee without whispers, and to have her mistakes remain her own, not turned into a meme. And that's what makes her story so fascinating. In a family that built a cultural empire on letting the world in, Aimee's greatest act of courage was closing the door. But walking away didn't mean disappearing. It meant rewriting her story on her own terms. And the path she chose is one you probably haven't heard. Until. Aimee may have stepped away from television, but she didn't vanish. Instead, she found a new way to be heard, without ever chasing a camera. She reintroduced herself not as Aimee Osbourne, Ozzy's daughter, but as Arro, a name built from her initials, Aimee Rachel Osbourne. And with it, she created a sound so different from her father's heavy metal roar that critics had no choice but to pay attention. Her debut single, Raining Gold, arrived in 2015, and it wasn't just a song, it was an atmosphere. The track was haunting, cinematic and moody, wrapped in electronic shadows and dreamlike echoes. The video, directed by Spencer Susser, unfolded like a short film, surreal, mysterious, and unsettling. Within weeks, it quietly went viral. Music blogs compared her voice to artists like Portishead, PJ Harvey, Kate Bush, and Massive Attack, pioneers of moody, noir-inspired sounds. It was as if Aimee had distilled the energy of Midnight City streets into music. Sharp neon reflections, rain on asphalt, the hush of headlights disappearing down an empty road. And the world noticed. Vogue featured her, music outlets wrote about her as the Osbourne who chose art over reality TV. Fans were surprised, not because she could sing, but because her voice carried such a different kind of power. Where her father's music was chaos, fire, and spectacle, Aimee's was quiet control. Where Ozzy screamed into the night, Aimee whispered, and somehow, the whisper was just as captivating. Arro wasn't trying to compete with the family name. She was building a world of her own. And little by little, she was proving that you don't need cameras to create a legacy. But as she carved out her sound, another question lingered in the air. If she loved her family, why did she stay so far away? The answer wasn't rejection. It was something far more surprising. For years, people assumed Aimee's absence from the Osbournes meant she was at odds with her family. Tabloids painted her as distant, detached, or even cold. But the truth was far more complicated and much more human. Aimee didn't reject her parents or siblings, she rejected the cameras. In interviews, she explained it with honesty. She valued her privacy. She wanted to be a daughter, not a character. And in a household where chaos was part of the charm, she knew how quickly family moments could be turned into entertainment. Her mother, Sharon, admitted years later that she felt sorry Aimee wasn't on the show. But she also understood. It wasn't right for her, Sharon said, acknowledging that Aimee's decision reflected who she was at her core. Thoughtful, guarded, deliberate. That choice may have looked like distance, but in reality, it preserved closeness. By stepping back, Aimee ensured that her relationship with her parents stayed personal, not performative. She wasn't just another Osbourne cast member. She was their daughter, in a way the cameras could never touch. And when life later tested the family with health scares and public headlines, Aimee's quiet boundary proved invaluable. While the world dissected every detail, she remained in the background, offering support in private, showing up when it mattered most, and refusing to let fame define how she loved. Sometimes saying no isn't rejection, it's protection. For Aimee, refusing the spotlight wasn't turning away from her family. It was holding on to them in the only way she knew how. But life has a way of testing even the strongest walls. And in 2022, a terrifying moment would remind Aimee just how fragile those walls could be. On an ordinary spring evening in May 2022, Aimee Osbourne was inside a recording studio in Hollywood working on music with her producer. For her, these sessions were sacred, quiet hours away from flashing lights, where she could disappear into sound. But in an instant, that sanctuary turned into a nightmare. A fire erupted inside the building, spreading with terrifying speed. Smoke filled the hallways, flames cut off exits, people inside scrambled for escape. Aimee and her producer were trapped. Reports later revealed that another person in the building did not survive. For those who made it out, survival came down to seconds and to strangers helping strangers. A fellow producer outside the studio rushed in, guiding Aimee and others through the smoke and heat towards safety. When news broke, Sharon Osbourne confirmed the story. Her daughter had escaped, barely. One of the survivors was Aimee. The headlines moved on quickly, as they always do. Another fire, another tragedy, another day in Los Angeles. But for Aimee, the experience must have lingered. When you create in quiet spaces, when your whole life is built on solitude and control, surviving something that chaotic changes you. It reminds you how fragile every tomorrow really is. And yet, what did she do after? She went back to the studio. She kept writing, kept singing, kept building the world of Arro. That resilience became part of her art. It's easy to sing when life is comfortable. But to return to music after watching life nearly slip away, that's a different kind of courage. And as she emerged from that fire, she carried something with her. The understanding that her voice wasn't just expression anymore. It was survival. But the fire wasn't the only trial Aimee faced. Around this same time, she was preparing to share her most ambitious project yet, an album that would define her career and reveal the depth of her vision. On the surface, Aimee seemed to have it all: talent, beauty, and freedom from the chaos of fame. But behind closed doors, her journey was anything but simple. She battled with the weight of expectations, constantly compared to Kelly and Jack, who had their own fame through the Osbournes. While Kelly's bold personality drew headlines and Jack's adventurous spirit earned respect, Aimee quietly carried the burden of being the forgotten Osbourne. Friends revealed that she often struggled with loneliness, feeling like an outsider, both in her family's world and in Hollywood. Her decision to walk away from the cameras gave her privacy, but it also cut her off from the public love and support her siblings received. And while Sharon and Ozzy tried to respect her boundaries, the truth was, distance built walls. Walls that even love sometimes couldn't break through. For Aimee, fame wasn't just something to reject. It was something she feared could consume her entire identity. She once confessed in a rare interview, "I didn't want to grow up defined by a TV show. I wanted to find out who I was, without millions of people watching." A powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest struggles are invisible, lived in silence, far away from the spotlight. Just when the world thought Aimee Osbourne had disappeared into obscurity, she began crafting something deeply personal, her music. Unlike her father's heavy metal empire, Aimee's sound was haunting, alternative, and ethereal. In 2010, she introduced her project Arro, short for her initials, Aimee Rachel Osbourne. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't commercial, it was pure expression. Her songs carried layers of vulnerability, often exploring themes of isolation, longing, and resilience. Critics were surprised. This wasn't just the child of a rock star chasing a hobby. This was an artist with a vision. Her single Raining Gold gained millions of views online, painting a cinematic picture of her pain and her power. Fans who stumbled upon her work realized they weren't just listening to Ozzy's daughter, they were listening to a voice of her own, one that had been waiting for years to be heard. Yet, Aimee never chased fame the way her family did. She refused to sell her identity for popularity, choosing quality over spotlight. In interviews, she admitted that she'd rather create music for a loyal few than for millions who only wanted a headline. It was here, in the quiet corners of her artistry, that Aimee finally carved her place in the world. Not as the daughter of Ozzy, not as the sister left behind, but as herself. For years, the world believed that Aimee had cut herself off completely from her family's whirlwind lifestyle. But behind closed doors, things weren't as fractured as they seemed. As Ozzy grew older, his health battles became more public. Parkinson's diagnosis, surgeries, and the toll of decades in the rock and roll fast lane. It was during these vulnerable years that Aimee quietly stepped back into his life. Sources close to the family revealed that while she may have avoided cameras, she never truly avoided her father. In fact, Aimee and Ozzy developed a bond that was stronger than the world imagined. They would spend evenings together, away from the chaos, simply talking. Unlike Sharon or her siblings, Aimee didn't treat him like the rock legend Ozzy Osbourne. To her, he was just Dad, and that simplicity brought him peace. In rare interviews, Ozzy admitted that Aimee was more like him than any of his children. Private, deeply emotional, and artistic. He once said that Aimee carried a strength that reminded him of his younger self, the version of Ozzy before fame consumed him. While the cameras never captured their laughter or their arguments, those closest to the family say Aimee was often the one who encouraged Ozzy to keep fighting through his darkest health struggles. Her calm presence balanced the stormy chaos of their household. For Aimee, these moments weren't about repairing old wounds for the public. They were about rediscovering her father in a way she never had as a child. Not as the unpredictable rock star who frightened her with his lifestyle, but as a fragile man, craving love and normalcy. Their late-night conversations, their private father-daughter time, became one of Ozzy's greatest joys in his later years. It was proof that no matter how far life had pulled them apart, blood always found its way back together. Time has a way of softening even the deepest divides. And for the Osbourne family, years apart eventually gave way to moments of healing. Sharon admitted in interviews that she often regretted how the spotlight fractured their family. She confessed, "Sad, "If I could go back, I'd find a way to protect Aimee better, to give her a choice without making her feel like an outsider." Ozzy, in his own way, shared similar guilt. He wished his daughter could have grown up without the weight of fame constantly hanging over their home. For a man known as the Prince of Darkness, Aimee was always a shining light, just harder to reach than the rest. Over time, Aimee began to reconnect. She joined family dinners, appeared in candid photos, and slowly broke down the barriers that once kept her at a distance. Though she never fully embraced the reality TV world, she chose something even more powerful: reconciliation. She understood that walking her own path didn't mean she had to walk it alone. In the end, what mattered wasn't the fame, the cameras, or even the legacy of the Osbourne name. What mattered was family. And Aimee, the one who once disappeared into the shadows, found her way back into the light of their love. Aimee Osbourne's story isn't about fame, scandal, or living up to a family name. It's about courage. The courage to step away from expectations and create a life defined on your own terms. In a world where millions chase the spotlight, Aimee showed us the power of silence. She proved that choosing peace over publicity is not weakness, but strength. That walking away from what everyone else desires can sometimes be the truest act of freedom. Her hidden life beyond the family spotlight carries lessons for all of us. That family bonds may bend, but they don't have to break. That individuality is not rebellion, it's authenticity. And that the measure of success is not how many cameras are watching, but how fulfilled you feel when the cameras are gone. Today, Aimee Osbourne continues her artistic journey with music, her quiet presence reminding us that sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones that don't scream the loudest. For the Osbournes, her choice became a missing piece of their legacy, a reminder that behind every stage persona, every headline, and every reality TV confession, there is still a human being simply searching for peace. And for us, Aimee's life whispers a timeless truth. Fame fades, family remains, and the bravest choice you can ever make is to be yourself.